Thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Kim Toller. I'm manager of the Sexual Assault Response Program, or SARP for short. SARP is part of the YWCA of Central Virginia. The YWCA Central Virginia offers many programs. We have a domestic violence prevention center or program, a child supervised visitation center, a racial justice program, our new Amend program, which is a mentoring program for young men. And we also offer a bridal shop where brides-to-be and those shopping for prom dresses can get beautiful gowns at a fraction of the cost. And that is actually our biggest fundraiser. I want to introduce you to some staff that we have in the room. Linda Ellis-Williams, our Director of Victim Services, is here. If she could stand up, please. And Martha Lee in the back is one of our victim advocates at SARP. Yes. These two ladies and myself will be available during the presentation and afterwards if you have any questions or concerns, or if the program tonight triggers you in any way. So I want you to know that help is here. If you need to slip out, just please do so, and one of us will come out and check on you. I also want to thank our interns that we have working for the YWCA. We have several here tonight that helped us get set up, and would you ladies please stand up as well? Thank you. Thanks. And Taylor, you should stand as well. Taylor is an intern for both the domestic violence program and sexual assault program, and Lydia and Cynthia in the back are both with us at SARP. Before I forget, I want to mention, if you didn't have the opportunity to register before you came here tonight, that's not a problem. But if you would help us out, and if you see one of these cards on the table, if you will register, that just helps us in the University of Lynchburg with some information, some statistics. And then there's also these QR codes on the tables as well. We're asking you to fill them out virtually or through the internet to scan them, and they're pre-test and post-test. And if you have any questions about these, just flag one of us down afterwards. So I'm really excited about this presentation that we have lined up for you all tonight. This is a partnership between the YWCA Central Virginia, the University of Lynchburg, and Impact Virginia. So about a month ago, I was looking at ideas for April's Sexual Assault Awareness Month and came across the Impact Virginia website. If you haven't been on it before, I would encourage you to check it out because it's just a wealth of information. So one night about 2 in the morning when I couldn't sleep, I emailed for some additional information, and Faye, I'm trying not to say her last name incorrectly, Chamal, responded probably within 24 hours. She is a BSN and RN and is the president and founder of Impact Virginia. Impact Virginia was formed in 2015 as an all-volunteer nonprofit to raise public awareness about the nature and scope of human trafficking in our country. As Faye and I were speaking about her organization, we were talking about some ideas, what presentations we can offer to this community, and Faye talked to me about sugaring on campus. So how many here know what sugaring is? Okay, a couple of you. Now, it's not waxing. So I'm glad that a few of you know what it is, and hopefully by the end of the evening, you all will be very educated. So I'm happy to turn this over to Faye for her to talk to us about her program, and let's get started tonight. So if I could get you to help me welcome Faye, I would appreciate it. Faye is on screen here with me.
And we are a Richmond-based nonprofit dedicated to raising awareness in the community about human trafficking, as Kim said. The bulk of our work is done in partnership with the School of Medicine at VCU, at the Virginia Commonwealth University, where my team works with medical students and faculty to create educational and training programs on human trafficking, not only for healthcare, but for the community at large. We're also involved in a lot of human trafficking research. We have a lot of projects going on, and sugaring is just one of them, which you will hear about from Nishali and Kathleen. So how did we decide to do research on sugaring? What led us to this point? 2 years ago, I logged into a webinar hosted by World Without Exploitation called The Bitter Truth About Sugaring, Deception and False Promises in Exploitation's New Frontier. And it was excellent. And I put the link in the chat box in case anyone wants to learn more after this event. But anyway, Megan was one of the speakers, and she did a fantastic job debunking the myths that I had about sugaring. And her presentation put me on fire to learn more. I had no idea how pervasive sugaring was on college campuses, and that the potential for the sugar relationship to morph into an exploitative situation like sex trafficking is astonishingly high, making it, in my opinion, a serious public health issue that needs attention. So a few days after the webinar, I reached out to Megan and her colleague, Dr. Angie Henderson, at the Avery Center in Colorado, and we discussed sugaring in greater detail, and we ultimately decided that my team needed to conduct a research study on sugaring at VCU for 2 reasons. First, in 2017, our local paper published an article that ranked VCU 7th in the nation for new college students seeking sugar daddies to offset tuition. And then secondly, data from the 2017 and 2018 Campus Climate Survey of Sexual Violence at VCU demonstrated that 3% of students at VCU had experienced human trafficking. Now, 3% of 30,000 students is a huge number, and that's 900 students who were victims of human trafficking in just 1 year. So these 2 trends compelled my team to think of ways to study how sugaring could be intersecting with human trafficking on the VCU campus. So we decided to start our research with a survey, a basic survey on the level of awareness of sugaring amongst students and faculty at VCU. And Vishali and Kathleen will present these findings. And then Megan, my hero, Megan Lundstrom, will follow their talk on what sugar dating can look like, how it can lead to violence and exploitation, and why sugaring should be a component in mandated violence prevention education on college campuses. So, thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Amelia Simmons, and I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight for this excellent program. I am a junior here at the University of Lynchburg, and since February I've been working as an intern in the U.S. Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women campus program here at the university. The campus program grant was awarded to the university in 2018 and was renewed in 2021 for 3 more years. Its purpose is to provide comprehensive responses to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking through prevention, education, and intervention. I'm also completing my Westover Honors College senior thesis on human trafficking, so I've been researching this topic for several months now, and it's just been really astonishing to me to realize how research informs. So I'm glad that you all have the opportunity to come out tonight to see this presentation. So in introducing our speakers for tonight, first we will hear from Vishali Jain and Kathleen Pugh, who are both 3rd-year medical students at VCU School of Medicine. Vishali is on the research committee for the VCU students fighting human trafficking. She plans on going into pediatrics and is passionate about advocating for patients, especially those who can't advocate for themselves. Kathleen also works with the VCU Students Fighting Human Trafficking Club to create trauma-informed care curriculum for first-year students. Kathleen plans to specialize in obstetrics and gynecology to pursue her passion for destigmatizing women's health issues. Our second presentation is from Megan Lundstrom, who is the founder and director of the Colorado-based nonprofit, the Avery Center for Research and Services, who has over a decade of both lived and formal experience in the field of domestic sex trafficking. She will be introduced by Taylor Deskins after the VCU research study. Taylor is a UL graduate assistant for student involvement pursuing a master's in public health.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen now. All right, are you all able to see this?
Yes.
All right, great, thank you. So, like I was told, first I want to thank you guys so much for having us here and sitting there and listening to our presentation. We're really excited about this topic and really excited to be able to present to all of you. So, like was mentioned, I'm Shelley, and we in Kathleen are part of the Students Fighting Trafficking group over town at BCU. And we came across this topic because of Faith Love and Impact Virginia. And like she gave a great introduction as to how we started our research. And so we're really looking at the acceptance and awareness of sugaring in the BCU community. So I wanted to let all of you know about sugaring. So if you see, you can either type in this polev.com/intelligent@393 into the web browser, or you can go ahead and text this to this number, and that should take you to a word cloud. And I just want you to think of like a phrase or two that comes to mind when you think of sugaring. And that link is up here as well. So I'll let this go for a couple minutes or so. Just want to see what your guys' thoughts are about what you think of sugaring. Or what comes to mind when you think of sugaring. Okay, I see donuts and money. Everyone see the link, okay? Oh, I like power and control too. And then these are all really great. Companionship. All right, let's go for a couple, maybe like 30 more seconds. I like that the companionships in quotes. Okay. Looks like men seems to be the most popular answer. Okay, all right, well, thank you guys so much for participating in that. I'm going to go back to our presentation. So, you all were really great in and those are some really great phrases that came up when you thought about sugaring. The actual definition for sugaring is advertised as a transactional dating practice, typically between an older individual and wealthier individual and a younger individual, usually in need of financial assistance in a mutually beneficial relationship. What this definition fails to emphasize is the fact that there is a power imbalance. And I really like how someone had put power down as one of your words, and also companionship, like Kathleen mentioned in quotes, because it fails to recognize that there is power imbalance between this older individual and this younger person, and that oftentimes this power imbalance can be exploited. And it also fails to mention that at times this companionship can include sexual services as well. So, about last year, we were introduced to Seeking Arrangement, which is this website's platform that allows for, it allows for people to be able to forge these relationships. And it actually recently went through I guess like a rebranding. So it's no longer actually called Seeking Arrangements, it's called Seeking. I think partially because of all the backlash that it has gotten. And, I'm sorry about that. And as you can see here, what we found really problematic about this website is that it is targeting, it is targeting college. It's students who are young or in their college, or in college. For instance, in 2010, I believe, students who had university emails were able to sign up for a premium membership for free. And at BCU, we decided to see how prevalent this was in our own BCU community. So last year, my group decided to create a fake profile, a fake sugar mommy profile. And we were able to witness that in the Richmond area alone, there were over 1,000 active seeking arrangement profiles from babies, babies being the younger, typically younger, less wealthy individuals who are participating in this relationship. And while we were on that website and our profile was active for maybe 2 to 3 months, we received over 200 messages from individuals trying to set up some sort of relationship. These are other things that Seeking Arrangements has advertised on their website. As you can see, they link, they advertise that they've been featured in Forbes, New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, CNN, all these very prominent, reputable organizations that make it seem like this is also a very legitimate website. In addition, they are truly trying to advertise themselves as a modern sort of dating relationship, calling it dating refined, or using phrases like date the elite, or live life to its fullest. In addition, since we have that fake profile being the sugar mommy, we were also able to see how some of the wealthier individuals, the sugar daddies or mommies, can filter their searches, and one of the filter categories is education. So this is another way that this website was tailored so that they could target those that were in college. This is a profile that we came across, and as you can see, sugar babies themselves are also advertising that finances are a huge reason why they are involved in this sugar relationship. Here, the student is saying that he's a broke college student with big dreams, and as a means for entering these relationships. So, like I mentioned, the reason that we were really interested in sugaring at BCU is because of the 2 studies that she had mentioned, and the fact that, like, as we said, BCU ranked 7th in the number of new signups for sugar daddies on the Seeking Arrangement website. And as you can see, their college, as we all know, college tuition becomes more expensive every year. And with so many of the sugar babies, just anecdotally that we saw, even in other studies that we've seen, who say that finances are a huge reason for them entering these relationships, it's important for us to know that this may be a reason why people are entering these types of relationships, because of how high tuition is. So the reason that we decided to do this study is because sugaring is still a relatively new sort of relationship that it's in the world, and it's not studied very well at all, particularly on college campuses. And organizations like Seeking Arrangements are making it easier and easier for individuals to target college students or college-age students in this area. And we already know how prevalent it is in the Richmond community. Another reason that I thought it was particularly important was college for most people is the first time that they aren't around social supports that they've had the rest of their lives. So it's the first time that for many students they're living away from their parents. They may not be are surrounded by friends that they've known their entire lives, in addition to coaches and other teachers of theirs. And so now they have for some people, they have a completely new community. And that community now consists of the peers that you are in class with, along with the faculty members that you interact with. So we wanted to know how aware the BCU community was of sugaring relationships. In addition, medical students get to act as a liaison between the undergraduate and the medical community at BCU. And we were hoping that if we learned, based off of the research and the data that we get, we wanted to bring more awareness about sugaring to both of our campuses. Previous research on sugaring in the US has primarily focused on the sugar babies experience. So it really looks at the motivations for why those who sugar have gone into sugar relationships, and also their own perception of what they do, and whether or not they perceive what they do as sex work. But the huge gap in research is actually the public perception of sugar relationships. And as we know, we wanted to see if there is stigma. And as we know, stigma can pose a huge barrier to getting care and seeking help. And so we wanted to see we just wanted to gauge what the perception on BCU's campus of sugar relationships is. So we're going to talk about our study now. So our research was primarily focused on these two questions. We wanted to know what the level of acceptance was of sugar relationships between the students and the faculty, and what the level of awareness of sugar relationships is as well. And we hypothesized that students would have higher levels of knowledge, acceptance, and awareness of sugaring compared to the faculty. And our goal with this research was really to add to the research that had already been done on this topic, which wasn't a lot, and also kind of understand what is known in our community. So we measured two primary outcomes. Our first primary outcome, again, is comparing the acceptance of sugaring between the faculty and the students, and the second was the awareness. And these secondary outcomes were things that we had been really curious about. So in the health science, we wanted to also compare the acceptance of sugaring between the health science and the non-health science students and faculty, given that students and faculty who are in the health science field often receive a lot of training on other topics such as domestic violence and sex trafficking. And so even though they have not received formal training yet on sugaring, however we do want to change that, we wanted to see if having exposure to some of these other more sensitive health topics would make them more, we wanted to see if there's any difference between the health science group and the non-health science group. And then our last secondary outcome was we wanted to see if we wanted to compare risk-taking behavior and the acceptance of sugaring. And we correlated whether or not if you had higher risk-taking behaviors, you would be more or less accepting of sugaring. So we'll talk about those results. So our survey looked at 4 major areas. We wanted to know, number one, who was taking our survey. So we asked all of our participants who participated in the survey to tell us about certain things like age and gender and education level, whether or not they were students or faculty. And we like to use those and figure out if there's any correlation with some of our other findings. And then the second part was acceptance. And we used this survey tool that was used in another study, which we'll get to see some of the questions that they used and why we decided to choose these surveys. For awareness, we actually came up with a survey ourselves, and we really just wanted to look at sugaring in our local community and any of the health risks and knowledge of the risks that go into sugaring in our community. And lastly, for behavioral risk assessment, we used this questionnaire that's been used to examine risk-taking behavior in the past in a bunch of other studies. So for acceptance, as you can see, these were the questions that we used, and participants would answer 1, that they absolutely disagreed with this statement, or 7, that they absolutely agreed with this statement for each one of these. So the reason we really liked this survey was because not only did it have some just objective questions, it also had some hypothetical questions. So a lot of participants who may have never been in a certain financial situation or a certain situation at all to try to imagine themselves and imagine how their behavior would be in these situations. Our second survey that we did was the one that we came up with for awareness, and here we were just trying to see how aware our participants were of the prevalence of sugaring and also the risks that might be associated with it, and participants would have to rank whether or not something was very true or very false, or some true or some false based on these questions. This was our reckless behavior questionnaire. The reason that we really liked this questionnaire was because not only did it include risk-taking behavior that might be involved with certain relationships, like having sex with someone you don't know very well, but this also looked at risk-taking behavior in things that were not necessarily associated with relationships at all, like shoplifting or using marijuana or driving under the influence of alcohol. So this really, we felt, encompassed risk-taking behavior in general, and that's why we thought this was a good model to use. And the way that we recruited students and faculty members for this is that we sent out a bunch of emails. We posted our survey out with flyers and everything, and we included participants who were 18 years or older, students or faculty members of ECU, and the only exclusion criteria we really had was if this email had gotten out to staff members who were not faculty, we decided to not include them because they do not have interaction with the students. So before we get to our results, I had wanted to give you guys some of our questions and just pull you all and see, I guess what you guys think about some of the questions that we have done. So we're going to do the same thing. The link is up above here. So go ahead and take the survey. I'll let this go for like a minute or two. And so the question is, sugaring is prevalent in my community. And you can text that same number or go to that same link as before.
So, Jane, how do you connect to the survey from my end?
Oh, do you see it at the top where it says text Vishali Jen 393?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so you can either do that or you can go to this link right here. If you can see me underlining it with my cursor.
I know, I'll just do the text, thanks.
Okay, sure.
This is weird, by the way, but I'm Google.
Okay. Okay, we'll let it go for one more minute. I also want to emphasize all of these are like completely anonymous, so feel free to respond however you would like, but we're not recording anyone's information with these. Okay, all right, so we got quite a spread. So some of you said that sugaring is very, very prevalent in your community. Some of you said false. Some of you said somewhat true, so that's interesting. We'll compare these with the results we got from Richmond. So I have two more questions for you all. So we're going to do the same thing, text that same link. I'm going to go ahead and activate this one now. I don't know if you run into any issues, but this one is asking if sugaring can lead to unintended consequences of the relationship, such as unhealthy relationships or imbalance of power or human trafficking. Okay, I'll let this go for a minute or two. Okay, so 93% of you said very true, and 7% of you said somewhat true. All right, we're going to go to our last one now. And this one is, I would seriously consider engaging in a sugar relationship if I thought it would help me have a better financial situation. And the answer choices are strongly agree, agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. So I'll let this go for a minute. Okay, 33% of you said agree, 42% of you said disagree, and 25% of you said not strongly disagree. So, okay, all right. So I'll let Kathleen take over now.
Yeah, so now that we've seen all of your results, it'd be interesting to see what results we received in our responses. All right, so for our acceptance data, this is just an overall graph of all the responses that we received, not separated by students versus faculty or anything like that. And the median score overall was a 9 out of 35 for how accepting folks were of sugaring. For our primary outcome, which was the acceptance of sugaring in faculty versus students, we did find that faculty had a much lower acceptance of sugar relationships than students did. You can see on the left, so faculty's median score for acceptance was a 6 versus students' median score of a 17. And our p-value was very low, meaning that this was a significant difference between the two groups. If you look over to the graph on the right, you can see that there's not even a lot of overlap between how students and faculty were responding, and it was a pretty clear, significant difference in how accepting students were more so than faculty. And so for our second primary outcome, which was the awareness of sugaring in faculty versus students, we saw a divide in our awareness survey between how folks were responding. The first 3 questions were really trying to get at how aware you were of the prevalence of sugaring in the Richmond community or the DC community, or if you knew like how common it is in our VCU campuses. And we saw that there was a low awareness of prevalence in faculty members versus students. But for questions 4 and 5, we were examining how aware folks were of the risks that could potentially be involved in being in a sugar relationship. And for these questions, we did see some difference in how faculty and students were responding, but overall, they were more in agreement about how risky of a behavior this could potentially be. And so just to give you a little bit more information on that and some visuals, so these are our survey questions, the first 3 talking about the prevalence or how common sugaring is in our Richmond community. And for this first question of sugaring is prevalent in my community, we can see on the right that almost or over twice as many students as faculty members said that this was a very true statement, that yes, sugaring is very prevalent in our community. And more than twice as many faculty members than students said that that was a very false statement. So we can see that there's this difference in how folks are responding depending on whether they're faculty or student. Number 2, very similar pattern where we see that a lot of students are saying it's very true that sugaring is more prevalent in our community compared to the average community. And faculty are more in disagreement, saying that this is a very false statement and that sugaring is not more prevalent in the Richmond community. Number 3 was just interesting to see how many people knew people who were involved in a sugar relationship, and students did respond that they that this is a very true statement, so indicating that they do know more people who are associated with sugaring or involved in sugaring compared to faculty members. And so for questions 4 and 5, talking about the risks involved with sugar relationships. So the first question being sugaring can lead to unintended consequences of the relationship, such as unhealthy relationships, imbalance of power, human trafficking. We saw that while faculty and students did still respond differently, if you look closely, the responses are not that different. Overall, faculty and students are saying that this is a true statement. They're just slightly different in how the degree of how true it is. So most people are saying it's either somewhat true or very true, but overall still saying it's a true statement. And then number 5 was also similar, that all faculty and students overall agreed that this is a true statement, which is that there could be unintended health risks for the sugar baby or sugar boy involving emotional, physical, and mental health from being in a sugar relationship. And so overall, we saw that faculty and students were more in agreement on these topics. And for our secondary outcome, the acceptance of sugaring in health science personnel versus non-health science personnel, the median scores for both groups were an 8, meaning that not a huge difference between how these groups responded, despite our thoughts that they might have different responses based on being in the health sciences or not. And for our other secondary outcome, which was whether the risk-taking behavior scores would be correlated with acceptance of sugaring scores, we did find that higher risk-taking behavior scores were associated with higher acceptance of sugaring scores. And we were able to calculate that about 6.3% of the variance in acceptance scores could be explained by risk-taking behavior scores, meaning that there is some association there. Since it's 6.3%, it's not accounting for all the differences in acceptance of sugaring, but it is one factor that could be playing a big role. And then just a point of interest that we found when we were doing this analysis, faculty and students were found to partake in similar amounts of risk-taking behaviors. And so their median scores for doing these types of risk-taking behaviors was very similar, 13.5 for faculty versus 14.5 for students. If you look at the right and how their risk-taking behavior scores graphed, you can see that between faculty and students, the results look very similar. And then just if you were curious about what responses were different or the same between students and faculty, the 3 bolded questions were the only responses that were different between faculty and students, and the other questions were responded pretty similarly. Things like damaged or destroyed public or private property and driven a car at over 80 miles per hour were relatively similar responses between the 2 groups. And so we are still exploring some of our secondary endpoints. In our demographic section, or part 1 of the survey, we had asked other participants to disclose things like their gender, their race, their relationship preference, and spirituality. We haven't finished the analysis of these secondary endpoints, but it will be interesting to see if these types of demographic features are associated with higher or lower acceptance of sugaring. So in summary, just to give you the skinny or the most important points, faculty overall had a significantly lower acceptance rate of sugaring than students. Students had a higher awareness of sugaring in 4 out of 5 of the awareness questions. The biggest difference in awareness was between the faculty and students was a question of the prevalence of sugaring, or how common they thought it was in the Richmond community. And there was a more similar awareness of the risks between faculty and students. For our secondary outcomes, we did not find a significant difference in the acceptance rates between health science and non-health science groups. And we did find that there was an association between higher risk-taking behavior scores and higher acceptance of sugaring scores. And so what is the significance of all of this? We did find that being a faculty member versus a student had a larger association with acceptance of sugaring scores than did being in the health sciences or not in health sciences. And we found that faculty and students are both similarly aware of the risks. However, there's this discrepancy in the awareness of prevalence, particularly at ECU, which is concerning since we know from statistics that we have this high rate of signups for websites like Seeking Arrangements. And our concern with this is that if faculty members or healthcare providers are aware of the risks involved, but they don't think that this is a common issue, they're not very likely to talk to their patients about it, and they're not very likely to screen their patients. And similarly, faculty having these interactions with students, they're not going to think that their students are involved in sugar relationships if they don't think it's particularly common. But it would be important for them to know as a potential resource, either as a healthcare provider or faculty member, like Charlie was talking about our social support systems. It would be important for people to recognize if people needed help in these types of relationships. We are also hoping that we would get a better understanding of the stigma involved with sugar relationships. As future healthcare providers, if we can understand the reasons why our patients might not want to come forward about being involved in these types of relationships, we can better understand how to approach them about it. And it's also important for us to know why they might not disclose these types of relationships to their family members and to their friends, potentially creating like this isolation for them. And then as far as the risk-taking behaviors being associated with acceptance of sugaring, we found that that was contributing somewhat to how people were accepting the sugaring. However, it's not the only thing involved since there's only that 6.3%. So it makes us wonder what else could be explaining differences in acceptance, and different things that have come up for us that we want to consider, the generational and financial gaps between faculty members and students that could be contributing. We did also identify some limitations to our study. The biggest one is the sampling bias. Since we are medical students on the medical campus, we have a lot more resources and outreach on health science campuses than we do at undergraduate campuses, and it could have biased how many of each group responded to our survey, and then if people who were associated with us or knew us were responding to the survey, they might have been a little more invested in this type of research and could have biases in that way. We also found that for question applicability, there were a couple questions on risk-taking behaviors that might not apply to every individual. We were also concerned about leading questions. When we talked about the risks involved in sugaring, we mentioned that it could be unintended consequences such as, and we listed some examples. And so by saying that, we could be leading folks into thinking this is risky. And then we did find that our study should have strong internal validity on other college campuses, but it might have limited external validity because we are only sampling college-educated individuals with being either student or faculty level. And so that might not apply to the rest of the U.S. population. And so for impact in future research, of course, any great study or research prompts you to have even more questions at the end of it. And so we all are wondering what other factors could be affecting acceptance. Could this be due to individuals' financial stability, their past personal experiences and relationships, and possibly with intrapartner violence or family violence? What are their motivations behind relationships? Do they desire sexual or platonic relationships? And then also, we wanted to think about educational efforts moving forward. How can we use this research to better the understanding and awareness like in our community and in other college campuses? And so our biggest idea is to have interventions such as this where we're talking to high school or incoming college-age students about possible risks involved in these types of relationships so that they can be aware if they do want to engage in these behaviors, that there are these risks involved. And then we also would like to have more training for healthcare professionals and faculty in the VCU community so that we can increase the awareness of the prevalence in Richmond and in other college campuses. And then also we would like to develop some type of health clinic questionnaire that can help us identify patients that could be in this type of situation in case they need additional help or resources. And so we would love to thank Dr. Rigby, Dr. Springle, and Faye Chongo for their undying help and support with this research. And then we'd also like to thank Impact Virginia for the funding in order to carry out this research. We would like to thank you all for being here today and listening to our presentation. We look forward to your questions.
You want to give them another round? I don't think they could hear it last time.
Thank you, Vishali and Kathleen, for sharing your research with us today. I know we really appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. My name is Taylor Deskins. I am currently the Graduate Assistant for Student Involvement in the Office of Student Engagement and Leadership Development. I sit on the Prevention Education Committee here on campus, and I also intern at the YWCA in a domestic violence prevention role, as well as with SARP, the Sexual Assault Response Program. I have seen firsthand just how the YWCA serves women and children and families of the region and the significant impact it has on their lives. I am proud that both the committee and the YWCA were able to put on this event together with our amazing guest speaker, Megan Lundstrom. Megan is well known for her unlikely story of sex trafficking. An August 2021 article in Elle magazine chronicling her experience describes Ms. Lundstrom as someone who understands, more than most, the conditions that force women into dangerous situations, and most importantly, as a victim survivor who holds the key to helping women escape. The article notes that she has gained most of her knowledge after her escape via the use of a primary source material, a private Instagram account, followed exclusively by active sex workers and trafficking survivors. Ms. Lundstrom was born in Greeley, Colorado, a university town of 100,000 people. At the age of 18, she got pregnant by her boyfriend, married, and with the second child, the marriage fell apart. At age 23, she left her husband and moved to Denver with her kids to start a new life. Ms. Lundstrom found work in Denver, but struggled to pay the rent and bills. This is when a friend introduced her to Seeking Arrangements, a website for uncommitted relationships where young girls go on dates with rich men to nice restaurants. The rest of the story we will listen to this evening. Today, Ms. Megan Lundstrom is the Chief Executive Officer of the Avery Center for Research and Services. The Avery Center is a sex trafficking research and resource nonprofit that Ms. Lundstrom co-founded in 2014. The center addresses the gap in direct services for adults experiencing commercial sex trafficking in northern Colorado and across the United States. She is a nationally recognized public speaker, trainer, consultant, researcher, and writer specializing in topics related to domestic sex trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation. She has earned a bachelor's degree in business finance and a master's in applied sociology. She is an advisory board member of Polaris, the leading data-driven social justice movement to fight sex trafficking and labor trafficking. She provides training and technical assistance for the National Human Trafficking and Technical Assistance Center for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Ms. Lundstrom has provided numerous presentations and is the author of various research publications on human sex trafficking. We welcome Ms. Lundstrom tonight, whose story is raising awareness and changing lives. Let's welcome Megan.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to jump right in here and share the screen, and then I can tell you a little story. Okay. So, as Taylor introduced me, my entrance into my trafficking situation actually started with sugaring. And I think that that's really important for many reasons, and we're going to unpack some of those this evening, and then also touch on the work that the Avery Center has been doing on this topic, particularly since the beginning of the pandemic and how the pandemic has shifted the commercial sex trade. So my first story that I want to share with you all really starts in that place of being a single mom. I was a college student and started advertising or posting profiles on Seeking Arrangements and other similar websites. And met this man, I met a series of men, but one man in particular, I went on a quote-unquote date with him, and he told me that he asked me if I was interested in prostitution, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Sugaring is kind of all I want to do right now. And he said, well, I could help you build a website. There's a website out there that you can write reviews on, and I can write a review for you, and you can find lots of men that are willing to pay for similar experiences. And so I kind of
just declined it and brushed it off because I really didn't understand what he was talking about. I didn't know at the time what I was involved in. But ultimately, over time, I came to realize that there is no difference in practice between sugaring and prostitution in any sense of the word, but particularly with buyers. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. What I do want to share is a few data points with you. Sugaring is still, there's so much research to do in this area. There's very little at this time. But when I look at some of these statistics here, I see myself as that young college student in these statistics. So 42% of seeking arrangement members are college students. Since the pandemic, membership has increased 74%. And then 8% of millennials are involved in sugaring, which is a pretty significant number. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how sugar babies are intentionally targeted for their vulnerabilities by 3 different groups of people. So first, by the website or platform owner. Second, by buyers or consumers, or sometimes referred to as sugar daddies or sugar mommies. And then third, also by traffickers. So when we're looking at who do websites, sugar websites target? Well, the Avery Center's research shows this, and it's been confirmed in other research as well. But when you look at who are the sugar babies, it is overwhelmingly females that are sugar babies on these websites. And then when you look at race and ethnicity and demographics on these websites, you see that sugar babies are slightly more likely to be women of color. And then by very nature of looking at who sugar babies are and this correlation with being college students, sugar babies are less likely than the US population to have completed a bachelor's degree at the time that they have created a profile on the sugaring website. But who else do sugar websites target? Well, this is all of our data, and so I also want to show you some of the information, the advertising that sugaring websites use to specifically target different communities in our society. So sugar websites target individuals who are undocumented, people living in poverty, minors, individuals who are currently unemployed or underemployed, individuals who are currently in prostitution, and again, high schoolers or college students. So it's really important to understand that these are specific demographics that these websites are targeting because they know that these individuals, when it comes to finances, are needing something or experiencing some form of economic instability, that they're maybe not able to meet those needs through traditional means. And so proposing this as a solution is how these websites are successful. So let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about who are the sugar daddies. Well, again, when you go on these websites, most sugar daddies and sugar mommies, when you look at all of those, most are men. And they are much more likely to be white men. But when we look at who are these men in their day-to-day lives and what other activities do they take part in? Well, these are the advertisements that often come up on men's websites when they're looking at pornography or using search queries such as looking for strip clubs or illicit massage businesses. And so sugaring websites have ads on those websites. So they are targeting men who are already purchasing sex through some other venue in their community. So I want to share a few quotes from some interviews that we've done with survivors over the years. And these are some quotes that we gathered from interviews, but also from looking at these review boards. So I mentioned these review boards at the beginning of my presentation, and I get asked all the time, what are these review boards? What are you talking about? It's on the dark web. There's websites similar to like Yelp that are just on the internet. They're not on the dark web. They are publicly accessible. Anybody can access them. But it is where men go to write reviews of their experiences with people in prostitution. But there's also a discussion forum component on these websites where buyers of prostituted persons can engage in dialogue, find information, share information, ask questions. So I want to share some of these quotes that we've gathered over the years. So who do sugar daddies target? Well, this buyer, when discussing on a thread about sugaring, that he tries to screen for needy girls. So targeting young individuals who are have some type of an economic need. And he makes it extremely clear right up front that he is willing to give them money if the individual comes over and performs the sex act that he wants in the moment. So this is another buyer on one of the review boards, and he talks about he really does not care where the individual has come from or their lived experiences or the barriers that they've encountered up till that point. So he says, look, we have a business arrangement. I'm not your therapist. I'm sorry that some of you have had a hard life. It doesn't get me in the mood. So at the end of the day, most buyers view this as a commercial sexual transaction, and they just want the sexual component of that transaction. They're not really concerned about why somebody is engaging out of economic necessity. And then we have this quote. So this one is rather graphic, but when we're talking about public health and sexual health, it's really important to understand that commercial sex buyers oftentimes go to sugaring websites to target individuals who maybe have not entered fully into prostitution yet. They're maybe dabbling their toes through sugaring. But because of that and the lack of education and awareness to what sugaring is and the exposure that sugar babies have to STIs, buyers are more likely to try to push physical boundaries and manipulate consent to get unprotected sexual acts from these individuals in exchange for money. So to summarize all of that, to buyers, there is no difference between a sugar baby and prostitution. They are one and the same. And we have more research on that too, that buyers really view sugaring and prostitution as the exact same thing. So these are again quotes from some of these review boards that buyers have engaged in dialogue around what the difference is between sugaring and prostitution. So you can see here that there's really no difference. Really the ultimate difference that buyers see is that there's a different price point, and it depends on what that particular sex buyer wants, if he's wanting more time or more sex acts or more variety, but really just viewing it as a product that he can access and consume when he chooses to. And again, these are some comments from buyers on the review forum. So this one buyer said, my last sugar baby broke off with me. She said I treated her like a prostitute and I still don't see the issue. And then this other one just comments that he finds the language differences, the terminology different, and yet it's all the same to him. He sees that these are commercial sex transactions, just using different terminology. So this is a super long quote, but this is the decision-making process in one of these discussion threads from an individual as he is weighing the difference of where he wants to spend his money because he knows what he wants to be able to purchase and have access to for that amount of money every month. And he's deciding whether he wants to have a sugar baby or engage with multiple individuals in prostitution. So he's just talking about if he saw somebody 2 times a week for $300 a session, that's $2,400 a month, but that's only 8 hours of sex in a month. So there's very little concern for the emotional well-being or physical safety of the individual. Again, it's all about how much sex can that individual have access to that fulfills his needs. So I really could go on and would love to leave time, lots of time for questions. So in closing, I want to just talk about a few of the things that I have seen work on different campuses or be discussed at different campuses as potential opportunities to address sugaring specifically. So first of all, as you heard earlier, campus-wide awareness efforts are super important, and not just with students. It's really important for faculty to know this too, that this is happening, and what the dangers are, but also in a way that creates a safe space for individuals who are experiencing these things or have experienced them in the past, be able to access mental health support, health care, peer support groups, and other resources in the community. And a lot of that can be done through a resource and health center education program or events like this, where students and faculty can access this information and learn more about what it looks like, how to have informed conversations with their peers about the harms of sugaring, and the reality of sugaring and who it impacts disproportionately. And then finally, one of the things that's really important for campuses to know is that websites like Seeking Arrangements, if students sign up using their .edu email address, they get a free or reduced rate membership with more access to like benefits, or they come up higher in the algorithms when sugar daddies are searching for them. And so this is something that universities can actually put in place, is to filter those emails and just prevent it from happening on their campus, because otherwise the campus themselves is somewhat complicit in allowing this to happen when websites are taking advantage of these .edu email addresses. Oops, that was time. So, in conclusion, the Avery Center, as was mentioned at the beginning of this, is based in Colorado, but we are a nationally serving organization. We have a wide variety of direct services for individuals who are either currently in the commercial sex trade or who have exited. Individuals do not need to identify as a sex trafficking victim or survivor to receive services. All they need to do is identify with the fact that they have experience in the commercial sex trade. Our services range from case management, housing, job program, care packages, peer support groups, therapy, and financial wellness programming, in addition to a whole range of other things and community partners that we can get folks connected with. So feel free to check us out or reach out to us. But thank you so much, and I look forward to answering folks' questions.
Thank you, Megan. We have microphones on either side of the room. I'm sorry, muted, thank you. Thank you, Megan. For the audience, we have microphones on either side of the room if you want to ask a question of any of our speakers, or if you want to talk up loud, I'll repeat your question if the speakers don't hear you. Go ahead. Thank you.
In the research on the campus at VCU, there was a lot of questions about the awareness of it. Was there any research done into students actually engaging in these websites or these practices?
Were you ladies able to hear that question?
Could you repeat the last part again?
Yeah, was there any data collected on students who are actually engaging in it, or was it just awareness of it taking place?
So we didn't actually ask individuals if they were partaking in sugar relationships in order to, we didn't want to like intimidate anyone from taking the survey if they thought that people were trying to like identify and being involved in these relationships. And then also we kind of wanted to start with just where is our like public perception of sugar relationships and like what is our general understanding of what's happening before trying to like go more in depth on who's actively participating.
Anyone else have a question?
I'm just gonna jump right in here, okay? Thanks, Megan, so much for clarifying the connection between prostitution and the term sugar, because I haven't heard it before. And I wondered if I were faculty, whether I would have known and more aware actually if the word prostitution was used instead of sugaring. So I wonder if that would have changed the survey results. The other thing is, besides money, I was thinking of a couple of other reasons people may want sugar too, and that's, just the romantic society of My Fair Lady. She was a sugar baby. And then the other reason, which I could be wrong about, but I'm just curious about people, body image alterations, whether they are higher rate to sugar as well. And lastly, we all use different terms, but I'm a mom, and I would be so enraged if this happened to my daughter. I actually I've had issues, and I have a friend that had a son that is a sugar boy. But I bet if you also, because constantly when you brought nation to church to the temple, and the monks would help you out too, because I'm sure they would really want it again. Thanks so much for all your work.
I actually had a question. I was wondering about the research of the number of males or the trans community that may be involved in sugaring.
That was a great question. Actually, our demographic data, we didn't get like a large portion of that representation. And in addition, like we did send out the survey campus-wide, but we didn't get as many responses as we would have liked. But it's definitely something that we would like to explore further, maybe with more data, maybe spreading this across like multiple campuses. We have enough data to actually look at that. But that's definitely really a good question.
And we haven't examined the male versus female. Like Vishali said, we didn't get a huge response for the LGBTQIA+ community. And that was also something that we would love to expand further, but it's difficult. You need to get a significant number of responses from each group, and so like Vishali said, expanding to more college campuses might be a good way to do it.
We got a question. Yes, ma'am.
With the differentiation between the non-health sciences faculty and staff and the health sciences faculty and staff, would there be any other categories that you would want to separate out, such as criminal justice or criminology students? That could have, I don't know how it's taught in health sciences, but as a criminology student, what's the awareness difference there? That's a possibility.
So I didn't hear the categories that you had mentioned, but that's definitely really good to something that we didn't formally look at in our survey, but we did actually ask what part of VCU all of our members were associated with. And that you're right, there can definitely potentially be correlations between different parts of campus and different experiences that people have had. Definitely something we would want to look at in the future when we have more data. But yeah, the reason of us looking at the medical versus non-medical have been because we want the medical community seeing some of more sensitive cases that have potentially been more aware of either the risks that go into this, or just be more aware of sugaring in the community itself, but we didn't find that. So
That's a good question. Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to ask if, besides filtering emails, is there anything else that college campuses can do to prevent sugaring on their campus, or is there anything that VCU is currently doing on your all's campus?
Did you ladies hear that question? Okay.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
Oh, no, go ahead, Nathan.
I was gonna say, I can answer like a portion of that question. I really do think awareness campaigns are kind of the first piece, and also more research to really understand what a specific campus needs. But when we look at sugaring, as really most people engaging in it are experiencing economic instability. And we're looking at that within the context of student loans and the cost of tuition. The more access people have to higher education that's affordable, and that can look a lot of different ways. I'm not going to get on a soapbox about that, but the more people can access higher education and actually afford it, the better it is, and the less likely that individuals are going to feel like they're being pushed into that space where they don't have another choice to pay off those student loans.
The work that is happening on campuses around Title IX, and clear definitions that have to be addressed of sexual assault and domestic violence, do you foresee this definition of sugaring ever being added to something that's required to be taught on campuses, or at least definition being having to be put out there?
I'm so sorry, I wasn't very well.
So she was asking in regards to Title IX, do you foresee the definition of sugaring and this being added to, I guess, what Title IX needs to address on campus? Is that correct, Linda? I want to make sure I'm phrasing your question correctly. What else did I miss with that? Yeah.
We have to define sexual violence and sexual assault and domestic violence
Mm-hmm.
in the Title IX work.
Yes.
Something that will be important for maybe coming down the pipeline.
So she was saying that we have to define domestic violence, sexual violence, and do you foresee this being added? And also with the training as well on campus, is this something that will be incorporated? Is that something that you've heard talk about or foresee possibly happening in the future?
I lost my connection for a second, but I wanted to say, it kind of pertains to this question too, that we had got a suggestion when we presented this research at the Human Trafficking Symposium that we could potentially use this research to like lobby concerning like the cost of tuition and like why this is contributing to sugaring being so prevalent on college campuses. So I do think that there's like potential legal implications for if we were to do another study on the prevalence or like ask individuals at VCU whether they're actually involved. I feel like that could potentially be used. I'm curious others' thoughts on
Yeah, there's implications to sugar as well. Sex trafficking or human trafficking is a federal crime. It's a state crime as well. And there's enough literature out there that documents the adverse health impacts of human trafficking, labor or sex trafficking. And the fact that sugaring can be an avenue that can morph into sex trafficking, I think it's imperative to include this in violence prevention education on campuses, as part of freshman orientation, because the more people know about this, the better protected they are. At least they will have resources. They will know what to do in case they find themselves in a certain situation. It's frightening the lack of awareness to sugaring that's happening on campuses. And people have to know the red flags. This is morphing into human trafficking. And just awareness of human trafficking alone is very, very low on college campuses. So I know with this research, I'm going to push for prevention education on the VCU campus. Hopefully with the studies that follow up, to meet with Title IX, to meet with the healthcare system, folks on the university love to talk about this problem and how it can correlate to the human trafficking that's already happening on campus. So, so there's just a lot that has to be done. And it's not just VCU, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's on your campus. It's happening on your campus. And so we just have to join our voices and really talk about this issue, get it out of the shadows, and create safe spaces so that students can talk about it and not feel judged, and feel safe to talk about it. Because we have to teach them how to stay safe, how to make safe choices. And that can only be done in an environment where people are talking and accepting, and there's just open dialogue about a very, very sensitive topic like prostitution, sex work, sex trafficking, and other forms of violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Megan, we've got students here with us today. If one of their friends is involved in this work, what suggestions would you have for them to talk to their friend?
Great question. The research that we're working on right now and have been working on for the past year or so is really focused on intervention and ultimately prevention of commercial sexual exploitation. And the biggest vulnerability or risk factor for trafficking is social isolation and loss of relationships. So having healthy relationships is, I feel like I could do another 2-hour presentation on how important that is for folks who are finding themselves in these situations. It's number one. It is the number one thing that traffickers strip away, and it is the number one piece that makes it possible for us to exit successfully long term. So that obviously can look different for each relationship, but healthy boundaries, healthy communication, and then continuing to be a supportive person, that can look a lot of different ways. So I could just share one example. I have a younger sister who's 5 years younger than me, so I was between the ages of 23 and 28 when I was exploited. So she was 18 to 23 or something like that. It's late, I'm not doing math well tonight, but she was one of the very few people in my family that remained in contact with me during my exploitation. And when I asked her about it, years later, we have a wonderful relationship now. And I asked her, how did you kind of stick it out, even though you could see what was happening, and I didn't want, I kind of presented I didn't want help, everything was fine, I denied what was happening. And she said, I just kind of chose the positive things that I saw in your life that you were doing, and I supported those 100%. And the things that I felt were dangerous or harmful or upsetting, I made a conscious decision to step back from. And she did so in a non-judgmental way. She never lectured me about my choices or, shamed me for them. She just opted not to, come to my place and party on the weekends because she understood what that meant, and she didn't want to be in that situation, and she didn't want me to think that she was condoning those things or supporting them. But being a single mom, she showed up for my kids, birthday parties, and if I was visiting our family or whatever, she made sure to be present for those activities because she really wanted to reiterate that those things were important and that she was willing to continue to show up and have that relationship with me. So that's one kind of example. I know it's not the answer for everything, but definitely maintaining those relationships is so important.
Thank you. Does that prompt anything for anyone else? Okay. Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us tonight. We really appreciate everything that you shared with us. And Faye, your website again is impactvirginia.org, is that correct? Yes.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. You all have a good night. Thanks. Before we leave, I just wanted to remind you of the services that we have to offer here in the community. We have a domestic violence hotline and sexual assault hotline. We have brochures in the back. We have an event calendar. We still have some things going on. Next Wednesday is Denim Day. Denim Day is where we wear jeans, and the Y has some t-shirts for sale if anyone's interested. But this is based on a ruling that happened in Italy, and I'm sorry I didn't make notes, so I can't remember the year, but basically a perpetrator of rape was acquitted in court, and the rationale behind that was that it was victim blaming. Basically, the victim wore tight jeans, so she wanted it, she asked for it. So this is standing in solidarity with all sexual assault victims. We believe them. We do not blame our victims. So that's what Denim Day is all about. If you're on social media, the YWCA Central Virginia has an account on Instagram, Facebook, and Stephanie Andrews, our executive director, is in the back. Are we on Twitter as well?
We are on Twitter, we're just not active.
Okay, thank you.
We'll get Facebook and Instagram.
Okay. And she does a great job of keeping our pages updated. So with different events we have going on, different information. We also have a racial justice awareness, or racial justice walk the last Friday of this month. I believe it's the 29th. We would ask that you register if you could, because we're going to provide lunch and have a great speaker. So we would love to see everyone turn out. But our hotline number is 947-7422, our brochures in the back. And did I even say that right, Martha? I realize I'm tired, and when I stop the number, I'm like, did I just give the wrong number?
So it's 888-947-7273.
Okay, that's our toll-free number, 7273, for people outside of the area. So we have someone that answers the phone 24/7. We have a walk-in center, an office that's across the street from Lynchburg General that we're glad to meet with people, and we offer support groups. So we're available after the presentation this evening as we close up. If you have any questions, or feel free to grab brochures. If not for yourself, we all know someone that has gone through abuse. Please share our information. Thank you to University of Lynchburg for all their hard work and partnering with us. And Gloria Braxton is waving this as a reminder. If you could please scan the QR code and take the survey afterwards, it really helps us. It's tied to funding. We want to see if you all learned something tonight, and it just gives us ideas for future events as well. Ms. Williams, did I miss anything? Ellis Williams? Okay, thank you all for coming out. We really appreciate it. Have a good night. Thank you, ladies.